Morning guys, this video is all about deconstruction, my personal journey, and a few thoughts on how to deconstruct without losing your faith or losing Jesus in the process. It's a challenging thing to deconstruct and to break down everything that you've known before and I guess partially felt secure in, whether it's good or bad. There's definitely been some security there, hasn't there? Some feelings or sense of worth built up into that, some identity that you have built around your faith in whatever background you grew up in. Now, of course, depending on where you've come from, I started out in a fundamentalist group, so there was a fair bit of unpacking that needed to be done. I didn't start until I was into my mid-20s though, which really has been extremely helpful in the downpacking. Like, I'm aware of the difference between myself and other friends who grew up in more rigid religious systems, and the struggle it is for them to break down, parts of faith that they were entrenched from birth, basically. So there was a fair bit of unpacking to be done for me, and that sort of deconstruction has occurred kind of for me over 20 odd years, I'd say, 25 years, I suppose, as a gradual process. So for me, it wasn't like I left the church and then just kind of chucked it all out and then had to build again. It was really a slow process for me, kind of a very gentle one, really. Went from a fundamentalist church to a very grace-filled church where we were at for maybe between 10 and 15 years, then sort of went to some more controlling Pentecostal type churches and Presbyterian, sort of fairly rigid, systematic one, then back to Pentecostal, and slowly sort of certain areas were challenged, but within the context of very churchy sort of situations. So for me, it's been a very gradual process, but the big things that I've learned there have really helped me, I think, to maintain and to stay and to get to know God within different contexts and to be aware and open to new ways of seeing God without sort of throwing baby out with bathwater, as the saying goes. So a lot of what happens is, for people I see, and I work as a counsellor, and I talk to a lot of people across groups and stuff that are deconstructing, and a lot of what I see happening is that there's that initial reactive part where the anger is quite strong, and it's tempting at that stage to kind of just throw stuff out and just go, nah, not having a bar of this crap, this is all rubbish. Everything they've taught me is rubbish, and because of the controlling fundamentalist beliefs or the, whatever it is that you've been brought up with that's really kind of got you and catapulted you out of that system, great that you have. But of course it's tempting then just to throw it all out, because whatever they've done or whatever they've taught must be all rubbish if this part is so bad. And this part, man, it is bad. There's no doubt about it. My fundamentalist family and those I know in that group, those groups, it's just so intense and so controlling and so ungracious, judgmental and critical that, of course, you're tempted to throw everything out. But what you find in there is that there's some basis of good things, because everything has good and bad. Mentioned in a group the other day that some of the battles that we have as we move out is that we're still very much in that same black and white thinking. We've now just jumped over to the other side. Before we were arguing, for Jesus, for strictness, for, legalism, for, I don't know, whatever it was, whatever our little bandwagon was. And then we jump over the other side and we're still just really doing this same kind of dualistic stuff. It's still very tribal, but now our tribe is just the other side. Now we're the deconstruction tribe. They're all bad, they're all wrong. We're on this side and we're all right now that we've deconstructed. Everything that we see is right and we see things very clearly, and clearly the other side is wrong. But of course, we understand as we go further, that's not how it is. It's not like there's two sides and one is right and one is wrong. We see that there's good and evil in everybody. There's a shadow. Everyone who's sort of looked deeply into any psychology understands that everyone's got a shadow side, but there's also good in everyone. So a greater way as we work forward, as I see it, is the deconstruction process is to become aware that both sides have valuable things that they can offer us, and that we're trying in a way to kind of weigh things up a bit more. The beautiful thing about deconstruction is now there's an invitation to question and to say, well, that just didn't quite gel with me over here. They were saying this, but that part never really rang true. This part over here about Spirit and Christ and God as Father, or whatever the thing was that, that those parts that struck you, that were sound and strong, and that the Bible had some worth in it, and that there was great things to learn from it. Sure, it may not be ineffable or indestructible or whatever these words are. I'm no theologian, but I understand that people have said this is it. It's inspired. Everything is in there is fully, almost dictated by God. No, but there's some real words of life to be found there. So how do we, weigh that up? Do we throw that all out and just go, I'm just going to look and find my own way? I found it's such a valuable thing to be able to sit back and to reflect and ask the questions and to go, okay, what am I going to do with this now? I'm now my own person. Those voices that are still there from past groups and from your upbringing need to be pushed out, and big part of the deconstruction is now that you can question it from a more adult point of view, from a mature point, and say, okay, where does this sit in here? How does it sit with my experience? How does it sit with what I know knowledge-wise in my head? How does it sit with other people's theology, early church theology, whatever, what we've learnt? How does what has been evolving into what people are seeing in Christ now, how does that work? How does grace fit in there? So we got the opportunity now to weigh this all up again and to just go, yes, there's so much good stuff in here. Yeah, there's some bad stuff, and the ways that, the establishment has tried to control things. It's become very rigid and boring and just constantly trying to hold, I think, the old manner in a sense, and continually trying to just go over and over the same thing. It's just not working clearly. There's better ways. But the opposite is that, of course, we come to this stuff and just chuck it all out and just go, it's all rubbish, I'm just going to do whatever I want, and no consequences, bar that. Well, we know that's not true. The way the universe is set up, there's always a consequence for action. There is a sowing and reaping situation. Not talking from a legalistic point of view, I'm just talking from the fact that the creation is kind of set up that way, it seems. So whatever we do, there's some sort of outcome. It doesn't take a genius to know that. What do we do with this stuff as we deconstruct? What do we do with the anger that we feel, the real, the vehement anger? Do we just set ourselves up as oppositional again, or do we allow that to be processed and to allow what we've learned about forgiveness, again, something that was a wonderful thing that was taught, perhaps not acted upon all that well in a lot of churches, but forgiveness, are we able to forgive over time and to see that these people, or in fact, as I've seen, I was one of those people that I'm now in kind of some sort of opposition to, I was one of them only some years before. So why am I trying to set myself up as diametrically opposite to them when in fact it's just a flowing process? If those who are further on the journey than me will tell you the way, and a lovely friend of mine, Cheryl's, shared something on one of the groups recently that I'm in, and she was talking, a little pictorial view of the deconstruction path, There's some going this way, there's some going over that way, but there is a divergence of those paths, and I think a lot of our coming back is that we weave in and out of what we've heard, what we've known, what we've experienced, and there's so much to be learnt and held on to, so much good stuff that's there that we don't want to lose all that and just chuck it all out. For starters, it's too much to process all at once. As I've said to people, I think it's healthy to just sort of break down areas one at a time where possible. Sure, there's a lot of anger. Maybe there's something particularly that's bugged you. Start breaking that one down. Work on that one. If it's legalism, if it's lack of grace, if it's judgment, if it's criticism, if it's, control or the establishment, the system, the programming, or whatever, brainwashing, start from there. What is it that I've picked up that doesn't sit with me in my spirit? What is it that can go and I can easily let go and I still feel totally comfortable? Guilt and shame are classics for this. we've been given this guilt and shame thing. Once you let go of that and then you realise that you can look at things and take your time and work through them, there's so much freedom there. You don't have to say yes or no to anything initially, but just let it sit for a while and let it meditate on it, let it flow around you and work out for yourself, does this fit with how I see God, how I see the Trinity, how I see Christ in the world working? Does this fit? Or is this, something that's been put on me through guilt and shame and I'm sort of reacting to it or being almost dragged along or into it? And of course, when we feel guilt and shame, we want to push away from that. But we don't have to push away into extreme positions because, again, we're just setting up another system in the same way as the one that's not already working, guys. That's what we've got to become so aware of. To keep growing spiritually, we just got to let ourselves sit back a bit more, slow the process down. Let's not be reactive, because that's, again, a sign of immaturity. As we become overly reactive, we recognise that still there's some places in us that are very hurt and very lonely and very small and childlike. They're all there in us. I'm 57, I still see those parts of me. It's not great, but that's part of the shadow that we all carry. But we don't want to live out of those places and let them be our guiding lights, as it were. We want to be able to be free to make decisions and to work out of places of rest. So something to think about there might be helpful. There's so much going on when you're deconstructing. There's a sense that we need to just slow the process down, let things come and go. Try not to hold on to too much anger, but allow some of that anger to flow out and to be constructively used to take on new areas as you reconstruct, so to speak, as you build upon whatever your foundation is. There's probably a really good one there. And I'm someone who loves renovating things and making them new. And people have said to me, this particular house I bought recently, 7 years ago, and renovated, tear it down. It's rubbish. It's useless. It's got asbestos in it. It's this and that and the other. But we went down and looked at it, went underneath the house. The lady had looked after it. It was 60 years old, I suppose, by the time we bought it. But the foundations were fantastic. The bones of the house, the frames of the house were just so strong. And to rip that whole house down and start again was a waste of time and money. So I was more than happy to renovate it and to build upon that frame and to extend it, put decks on and make it all fancy, yes, but the bones were good. And I'm sure for you've got a lot of good bones in there that you can work with from a good foundational point of view, and it's going to be really helpful. Rather than, if you've ever tried to pull something down and start again, there's a lot of work on the ground that needs to be done to rebuild a new foundation. Don't take that for granted. You've got one already. Everyone's got a foundation. Sure, it might feel a bit rocky, but there's some really good stuff in there. So hold on to it, have a look at it, reinvestigate it, chip out any stuff that's rubbish or rotten, get rid of that, but don't throw the whole thing out, because otherwise you're going to have to spend so much time questioning, and the stress and the anxiety of it is a lot to cope with all at once. So I'll talk some more about this in another video, but thanks for listening. If you like this and it's helpful to you, please subscribe to this channel. I talk a lot about stuff around deconstruction and moving through, from trying to keep a fairly balanced point of view, not to be too extreme. And so if you like, subscribe, please comment on the videos. That's really helpful, and share them with your friends. I'd love to get out there further. Thanks for listening.